My friends, I want you to imagine for a moment a master gardener standing over a beautiful vine. He sees the branches that bear fruit, strong and full of life, stretching toward the sunlight. But he also notices something else. There are branches that no longer bring life. These branches have become weak, tangled, and overgrown. They do not produce fruit, yet they continue to pull nutrients from the healthy branches, draining the vine of its strength. And so with wisdom, care, and precision, the gardener begins to prune. He cuts away what no longer serves the vine, not out of cruelty, but out of love, because he knows that by removing the dead branches, the vine will grow stronger, the fruit will be fuller, and the harvest will be greater. That gardener is our God. And there are times in our lives when he must do the same work in us. There are people we have held on to, people who once may have been part of our journey, who once walked alongside us in friendship and love, in companionship. But now their presence no longer brings life. They have become a weight, a distraction, a stumbling block to what God is calling us to do. And so in his wisdom, he begins to remove them. Now let me tell you something, when God removes someone from your life, it is never to harm you. It is never to leave you empty or broken. It is always for your good. But the problem is, many of us resist the pruning. We fight against it. We cling to relationships that are no longer meant to be. We hold on to friendships that pull us away from our faith. We stay connected to people out of fear of being alone, fear of change, fear of the unknown. But hear me today. When you hold on to what God is trying to remove, you are not protecting yourself, you are delaying your blessing. I have seen this happen time and time again. I have seen men and women cry out to God for growth, for purpose, for direction. They say, Lord, take me higher. Lord, use me. Lord, bring me into my destiny. But when God begins to answer that prayer by removing the wrong people, they resist. They question him. They chase after what he has already cut away. But I tell you today, if you truly want to walk in the fullness of what God has for you, you must be willing to release what he has taken away. Think for a moment about the people in your life. Are they leading you closer to God? Or are they pulling you away? Are they encouraging your faith? Or are they feeding your fears? Are they helping you walk in righteousness? Or are they making it easier for you to fall into sin? Some of you are still tied to relationships that God has already given you the strength to leave. Some of you are wondering why certain friendships feel distant, why certain doors have closed, why people you once trusted have walked away. Let me tell you something, if God removed them, it's because they were not meant to go where he is taking you. You see, not everyone can handle the calling on your life. Not everyone is meant to walk with you into your next season. Some people were only meant to be with you for a time, but now that time has passed. And if you try to bring the wrong people into the right season, they will only hinder what God is trying to do. So I ask you today, what are you holding on to that God has asked you to release? Are you willing to trust him, even when it hurts? Are you willing to believe that his pruning is an act of love? Because when you finally let go, when you stop chasing after what he has already removed, you will find that what he has prepared for you is so much greater than anything you left behind. Some of you may be wondering, why does God take people out of my life? Why would a loving God allow relationships to fade, friendships to break, and people I care about to walk away? It's a painful question, and if you've ever had someone you love drift away, betray you, or simply disappear, you know that it can shake you to your core. It can make you question everything, your decisions, your worth, and even your faith. But let me remind you of something today. God sees what you cannot see. He hears the conversations you never heard. He knows the motives you never perceived, and he understands the long-term consequences that you, in your human limitations, cannot comprehend. We see people through the lens of the present moment, but God sees them through the lens of eternity. And because he loves you, because he has a purpose for you, he will not allow the wrong people to remain in your life when they have the power to destroy what he is trying to build in you. We often pray for blessings, for growth, for new opportunities. We ask God to elevate us, to expand our territory, to lead us into our destiny. But what we don't realize is that sometimes before God can add to our lives, he first has to subtract. Before he can bring the right people, he has to remove the wrong ones. Before he can bless us with his best, he has to clear away what is hindering us. But here's where many of us struggle. We mistake God's removal for rejection. We mistake his pruning for punishment. Think about a parent protecting their child. If a loving father sees his child playing with something dangerous, he will take it away. The child may cry, may protest, may not understand, but the father knows better. He knows that what seems fun in the moment could lead to harm. And so he removes it not because he is cruel, not because he wants to make his child suffer, but because he loves that child too much to let them stay in danger. The same is true with God. Sometimes he removes people from our lives not because they are bad, but because they are not right for the next step of our journey. Some relationships are seasonal. They were meant to help you in one stage of your life, but they were never meant to last forever. And if we refuse to let go of what was only meant for a season, we will never step into what God has for us in the next. Look at Abraham and Lot. When God called Abraham to step into his divine destiny, he took Lot with him. But as time went on, conflict arose between them. It wasn't until Abraham and Lot separated that God gave Abraham the next step of his promise. Some of us are stuck, not because God isn't speaking, not because God isn't moving, but because we are holding on to people he asked us to release. Or think about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He had walked with 12 disciples. He had poured into their lives. He had broken bread with them, taught them, loved them. And yet in his darkest hour, some betrayed him, some denied him, and many abandoned him. But that was part of God's plan. If Judas had not walked away, Jesus would not have walked into his destiny. If those who claimed to love him had not left, the cross would never have been fulfilled. Sometimes God allows people to leave because their departure is necessary for your destiny. You may not understand it now. You may weep over it. You may question why it had to happen the way it did. But if you trust God, if you truly believe that his ways are higher than yours, then you must believe that he knows what he is doing. So many of us hold on to relationships that are draining us. We hold on to friendships that have turned toxic, partnerships that are no longer aligned with our calling, people who do nothing but discourage, distract, or deter us from what God has placed on our hearts. And yet we ask God, why am I not growing? Why am I still stuck? Why do I feel so heavy? Could it be that you are holding on to what God has been trying to remove? Could it be that your blessing is on the other side of your obedience? Could it be that the reason you feel weighed down is because you are carrying people who were never meant to go where you are going? I know it's hard. I know it hurts. But let me encourage you today, when God removes someone from your life, it is never a loss. It is a step toward your breakthrough. It is a sign that he is preparing you for something greater. It is proof that he is protecting you from something you cannot see. Trust him. Trust that he is leading you even when you don't understand. Trust that he is guiding you even when it feels painful. And trust that if he takes something away, it's only because he has something better in store. Some of you are holding on to relationships that have already run their course, but you are afraid to let go because you don't know what life will look like without them. You've gotten so used to their presence, their voice, their company, that the thought of moving forward without them seems unbearable. But let me tell you something, anything that is meant for you in God's plan will never require you to compromise your faith, your peace, or your purpose. And if a relationship is costing you those things, then it is not a gift, it is a distraction. I know how hard it is to say goodbye. I know how painful it is to lose someone you thought would be there forever. Maybe it's a friendship that started off strong but has now become filled with jealousy, competition, or gossip. Maybe it's a relationship that once felt like a blessing, but now it only brings confusion, heartache, and distance from God. Maybe it's a person who once encouraged your dreams, but now only fills you with doubt and discouragement. And yet, because of history, because of attachment, because of fear, you hold on. But hear me today, holding on to what God has already removed is like carrying dead weight. It slows you down, it drains your energy, it prevents you from walking fully in your purpose. Some of you are exhausted, not because you're doing too much, but because you are carrying too many people who were never meant to go with you into your next season. Some of you feel stuck, not because God isn't opening doors, but because you are still standing in the wrong place with the wrong people, afraid to move. Think about how many times God has tried to warn you. He sent red flags. He sent a lack of peace. He sent situations that made it clear this person was no longer for you. But instead of letting go, you held on tighter. Instead of trusting him, you reasoned with yourself. You thought maybe if I just love them harder, they will change. You thought maybe if I just give it more time, things will get better. But what if God has already given you the answer? What if the change you are waiting for is never going to come because this person was never meant to go where God is taking you? We serve a God of order, not confusion. When God sends someone into your life, there will be alignment, peace, and confirmation. But when you hold on to someone he is trying to remove, you will feel constant tension, turmoil, and unrest. God does not bless disorder. He does not bless toxic attachments. And He will not allow the wrong people to remain in your life if their presence is preventing you from walking in the fullness of His plan. I've seen it happen over and over again. I've seen people fight to keep someone in their life, only to later realize that person was never meant to stay. And when they finally let go, when they finally surrendered, they looked back and saw all the ways God was trying to protect them. They saw the sleepless nights they could have avoided. They saw the emotional roller coaster they could have escaped. They saw how much further along they could have been if only they had trusted God's guidance instead of their own desires. And let's be honest, sometimes we don't want to let go because we don't like being alone. Sometimes we convince ourselves that even a bad relationship is better than no relationship at all. We settle for companionship, even when it costs us our peace. We tolerate mistreatment because we would rather have someone by our side than face the unknown. But what if your loneliness is not a punishment? What if it is a season of preparation? What if God is setting you apart so that He can do a work in you before bringing the right people into your life? Some of you are so afraid of being alone that you would rather stay in dysfunction than step into divine alignment. But I'm here to tell you God will never take something away without having something greater in store. He is not trying to deprive you. He is trying to position you. He is not trying to hurt you. He is trying to heal you. But you cannot receive what He has next if your hands are still clinging to what was. It's time to stop looking back. It's time to stop chasing people who have already left. It's time to stop trying to fix what God has already dismantled. If God removed them, let them go. If He closed the door, stop knocking. If He took them out of your life, trust that He did for a reason. Some of you have been crying over what you lost, but God is saying, if only you knew what I was making room for. Some of you have been begging for a relationship to be restored, but God is saying, I have something so much better, if only you would trust me. You have been looking at what was taken, but God is looking at what is to come. So will you trust Him? Will you believe that His plans are better than your own? Will you surrender the relationships, the friendships, the connections that has asked you to release? Because when you finally let go, when you finally trust Him, when you finally open your hands and surrender, you will see that what He has for you is far greater than anything you could have held on to. Some of you are standing at the edge of a breakthrough, but you can't step into it because you are still holding on to people God has already removed. You are dragging along relationships that no longer serve you, friendships that no longer align with where God is taking you, and connections that were only meant to be temporary. And you wonder why you feel stuck, why you feel drained, why you feel like you are not growing. It's because you are trying to carry people who were never meant to walk this part of the journey with you. God has been trying to make it clear to you. He has been showing you through disappointment. He has been speaking to you through your spirit, through your prayers, through the uneasiness in your heart. He has been giving you signs, but you have ignored them because you don't want to face the pain of letting go. You don't want to accept that some relationships have an expiration date. You don't want to admit that just because someone was good to you in one season doesn't mean they are meant to go with you into the next. And I understand that pain. I understand the grief that comes with losing people who were once close to you. It can feel like a piece of your heart is being torn away. You shared memories, experiences, and dreams with them. You walked through struggles together, celebrated victories together. They were there for you when no one else was. And so the thought of moving forward without them seems impossible. But let me remind you, just because someone was part of your past doesn't mean they are meant to be part of your future. Some of the people you are holding on to have already served their purpose in your life. They were there to teach you a lesson, to shape you, to challenge you, to help you grow. But their time in your story is over. And if you keep trying to hold on to them, you will only slow yourself down. You will only keep yourself from stepping fully into what God has for you. Look at the story of David. Before he became king, he had a close relationship with Saul. Saul brought him into the palace, mentored him, gave him opportunities. But there came a time when Saul no longer saw David as a blessing, he saw him as a threat. Saul's heart turned against David, and suddenly the man who once supported him was now trying to destroy him. David had to flee, to separate himself, to trust that even though the relationship had changed, God was still in control. Some of you are still trying to hold on to a Saul in your life, someone who once supported you but now only brings you pain. Someone who once celebrated you but now secretly resents you. Someone who once walked with you but now stands in the way of where God is leading you. And yet you refuse to walk away because you remember how good things used to be. But hear me today, just because someone was a blessing in one season doesn't mean they are meant to stay forever. We must learn to recognize when a relationship has reached its end. We must learn to trust that if God allows someone to leave, it is because their part in our story is finished. It doesn't mean they were bad. It doesn't mean they were worthless. It simply means that God has something else for us, something that requires a new level, a new mindset, and sometimes a new circle. Some of you are holding on to people out of guilt. You feel like you owe them because they were there for you in the past. You feel like you can't walk away because they helped you when you were struggling. But let me tell you something, just because someone was part of your past doesn't mean they are part of your destiny. You can be grateful for what they did without keeping them in a place that no longer fits. You can love them from a distance, pray for them, honor them, but still move forward. And then there are some of you who are holding on to people out of fear. You are afraid that if you let them go, you will be alone. You are afraid that if you walk away, you won't find someone else. But listen to me, God will never remove someone from your life without preparing something better in their place. He will never take away without also giving. He will never ask you to release without also having something greater for you to receive. But you cannot grasp the new thing if your hands are still full of the old. I know it's not easy. I know it hurts. But I also know that when God does something, He does it for a reason. When He removes, He also restores. When He prunes, He also produces growth. When He separates you from people who no longer align with your destiny, it's because He is positioning you for something greater.